Hi everyone, I'm Tyler, and this is Jade.
Jade.
We're gonna tell you about some pretty cool stories. The first one is
Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. Okay, so Alibaba was a poor woodcutter, and he was in the forest when he saw 40 thieves stop by a cave, and he saw that the leader of them said, "Open sesame."
Open sesame.
And then he saw, before his eyes, he saw the cave magically open, and then the men disappeared inside. And he counted 40 of them. Yeah.
40.
To close the entrance, the leader would say, "Close sesame," and then the cave sealed itself. And then he was so excited, so he waited until the thieves left, and then he said the magic words, and then he came in there and saw lots of treasure. And then Alibaba told his brother about the cave, and so he set out to get the treasure too. So he forgot the words to the cave. He was like, open like Honcho or something, and then
Honcho.
but then the thieves, they killed him.
Yeah, they sliced his throat.
They sliced him, and I think they left him there. And then the brother, he came back and he saw it, and he saw his brother's body in the cave, and then, with the help of a slave girl called Morgiana, body back. And then, realizing that someone knew about their cave, the thieves tracked Alibaba down. And then the leader, disguised as an oil seller, stayed with Alibaba.
Whoa.
And then he brought along mules loaded with 40 oil jars. And then the jars had the 40 thieves in them.
Obviously.
And then Morgiana was really clever, and so she knew who the oil seller really was, and she knew who was in the little jars. And then so she poured boiling hot oil into the jars and killed all the 40 thieves. And then, while dancing in front of the leader of the thieves, Morgiana stabbed him, and then Alibaba was saved, and then they lived happily.
Okay, now our next story is called Rumpelstiltskin. And this one starts out to where there was a greedy, powerful king in a kingdom. And he goes out into his land, and he comes to this man who owes him some money. And the man doesn't have the money. So he lies and he tells the king that his daughter, who's beautiful BT dubs, can spin yarn into gold. Now that's a total lie. And so the king's like, oh my god, cool. So he takes her back to the castle and is like, you must spin this yarn into gold for me, and if you don't do it by tomorrow morning, I'll kill you. So she was like, son. And then she's like, how am I ever gonna do this? And then this little like midget man, he was like super ratchet looking, comes and he's just like, he's like, spin that yarn into gold for you if you do whatever I say when the time comes. And the girl's like, sure, whatevs. So he spins the yarn into gold for her, and then the king comes back and he's like, hey, this is awesome. And then he gets greedy and he's like, you must do it again, and if you do it, then I'll make you my queen and my wife. And so she's like, what? She's like, I hope that weird guy. So he comes back and is like, if I do this for you again, you have to do whatever I want. And she's like, okay, cool. So then he spins it into gold again, and then the king comes and he's like, I will marry you. And so she's like, yay. And so as she's getting ready for the wedding, the little midget dude comes back and he's like, hey, do you remember our deal? She's like, sure, what is it? And he's like, whenever you have your first it. And she's like thinking, okay, whatever, like this freak's gonna find me in a year. And so she agrees to it. And so a year passes, they're all good, and so she has her baby because she got pregnant. So the baby pops out, and this ratchet little elf gnome guy comes back, and he's like, hey, I want that baby. And so she's like, oh no, please don't take my baby, and she begs and pleads with him, and he's like, he feels sorry for her, and so he says, if you can find out what my name is in 3 days, then I will let you keep your baby. So she's like, okay, cool. And then she a squire to go out into the town and ask anyone if they know anyone that looks like him or if they know anyone by the name. So he comes back after the first day and is like, have you found my name? And she's like, John, Joe, Mary, Laquifa, you know, the usual. And so then he's like, no. So the second day, she does the exact same thing. She searches far and wide, and he comes back and she's like, John, Joe, Mary, Laquifa. And he's like, no. So then the third day, she said, go search the mountaintops way up high. And so he goes up there, and he runs into he runs into a spinning dude. He's like, I can't wait to get that baby. And he's like, she'll never know that my name is Rumpelstiltskin. Shoo. So her little Versace dude goes back to her, and he's like, I found his name. It's Rumpelstiltskin. So on the third day, Rumpelstiltskin comes back and he's like, do you know my name? And she's like, let me think. Is it Paul? And he's like, no. And she's like, is it Rumpelstiltskin? And he's like, oh, no. And he gets so mad, he ends up like ripping himself in half. Yeah. He's got serious anger problems. And that's the end of the story. She gets to keep her baby, and some gnome dude got ripped in half. So yeah.
Cool story.
What's the next story, Jade?
It's The Fisherman and His Wife.
Oh, really? That sounds like a really interesting tale. How about you tell us about it?
Okay. So, a fisherman catches a flounder.
Ooh, like Little Mermaid?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then releases it when it pleads for mercy and tells him that he's an enchanted prince. And so he tells his wife back home, Isabel, about the encounter, and she scolds him for not asking Flounder for anything. So she tells him to see and ask for a bigger house. He does so, and then the wish is granted. And then the wife is content for only a short time and then sends him back to demand more. And then she wants to be king and then an emperor and live in a palace and then a pope. And then all the wishes are granted, but then she wishes she wants to be God. And then
you can't do that.
Yeah, you can't do that. And then
only Miss Viegas can do that.
Yeah. And then the husband, he doesn't want to do that. He's like, well, we've already got this beautiful cottage. We don't need anything else. So then when she her husband find themselves to be back in the shack.
The shack.
The shack where they lived before they started out, before they met the flounder.
Yeah.
That's the end.
What's the next tale, Jade?
Oh, you want me to tell the next tale?
What's the next tale, though?
Bluebeard? No, it's Peter Piper and the
okay. Let me tell you about a little man I know named the Pieper of Hamlen. Okay? So, there was this town called Hamlen, and it was like ratchet ghetto Beaumont, where Miss Viegas used to live. And they had like a rat infestation problem. Like there were rats all up in that business. Like they were everywhere. Like so many rats. Like you can't deal with the rats. And so they decided to hire the Pied Piper. And so the Pied Piper's like, okay, what are you doing?
Keep on talking. I don't know.
The Pied Piper was like, if I do this for you and get rid of all your rats, then you have to pay me this like large amount of money. They're like, okay, cool, let's do it. So then he plays his little flute thing. He's like, and he all of the rats. And so he goes back for his payment, and the people are like, we're not gonna pay you. Like, we were just joking, ha ha. Well, the Pied Piper took a little bit too seriously, and he's got some sociopathic problems because he went back into town the next day and played his flute and gathered up all the children in the town and took them, and he led them into a cave, and no one ever saw him or the children ever again.
Sick.
He's sick. That would be the Pied Pieper of Hamlen. What's the next one, Jade?
The next one's Bluebeard, and it's really, really long.
Like
3 paragraphs.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say it. Okay, so there was a wealthy aristocrat named Bluebeard, and he was so rich, and he had a huge house and lots of money and everything. But everyone, like, none of the girls loved him because his beard was blue. And
yeah, because that's ratchet.
Yeah, and it's ugly, and they thought he was ugly and gross, and they're scared of him. So he'd been married several times, shocking though, and but no one knows about his wife. He was avoided by the local girls. But when he asked one of his neighbors to marry, if he could marry one of their 2 daughters, they were terrified. But he talks to the younger daughter, and then he hosted a wonderful banquet, and then he persuades her to marry him. Wow. And then after the ceremony, they get married, and then after the ceremony, they go live in his chateau. Ooh. His fancy chateau. Ooh. And then after, he announces that he must leave the country for a little bit, and then he gives her all the keys to the house, and he said, you can open all the doors to the house and take all my treasures and invite your homies and all your home girls and all your besties and everything. And then, but he said, but you can't go in this one room with this little key because it's private, and under any circumstances. And so she vows, she's like, I will never go in that room because I have all this stuff. And then he goes away and then leaves the house in her hands, and then immediately she's overcome with the desire to see what the forbidden room holds. And then, despite the warnings of her sister, the girl abandons her guest after she has like a house party, takes the little key and then takes the room. And then the wife immediately discovers the room with a horrible secret. All the dead bodies of all the wives. Ah!
Oh.
And so she drops the key into a pool of blood, and then she leaves the room, but there was a blood stain on the key, and she tried to wipe it off, but it wouldn't come off, like a permanent stain on the key. And so she reveals the secret to her sister, Anne, and they both plan to leave the castle the next day. But Bluebeard returns unexpectedly the next morning, and then, noticing the blood on the key, immediately notices his wife has broken the vow. And so he's like, now I have to do the deed. I have to kill you because you know my secret. Mm-hmm. And then so she's like, okay, let me say my prayers for a little bit. And then he says, okay, I'll give you a quarter of an hour. And then tower, and then Bluebeard tries to break down the door, and the sisters wait for their 2 brothers to arrive to like rescue them. And at the last minute, as Bluebeard is about to kill her, the brothers break into the castle and kill him. They kill Bluebeard.
Oh, whoa.
I know. And then the girl, she receives all the fortune. And then She marries a worthy gentleman and lives on and bathes in his riches.
Oh, bays.
She lives with all that money and gold and a nice husband.
Dang. What's the next story, Jade, or do we have one?
We don't have any more stories.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Well, I hope you liked the video. I mean, like, comment.